The massive Exal-Thori warship materialized in Earth's orbit without warning, casting a shadow over major cities as it slowly rotated. Supreme Commander Galvex stood on the bridge with six-fingered hands clasped behind his back, mandibles twitching in anticipation. The primitive bipeds of this backwater world would make an excellent gift to Prince Zorthal. A simple conquest to begin the prince's military portfolio. Begin atmospheric penetration, Galvex ordered, his voice like gravel sliding over metal. Let them witness true power. The warship descended through clouds, holographic projectors displaying its enormous form to populations below. In Times Square, Rio's Copacabana, and Beijing's Central District, humans stopped and stared upward as the alien vessel, nearly 2 kilometers long, broke through the cloud cover. Scans indicate their military forces are mobilizing, reported Sub-Commander Thex. Primitive fission-based weapons, nuclear-tipped missiles launching from multiple sites. Galvex flicked 2 fingers dismissively. Deploy countermeasures. Across Earth, military commanders watched in horror as their most powerful weapons disintegrated mid-flight, converted to harmless particles by Exal-Thori interdiction fields. Open planet-wide communication channels, Galvex commanded. It's time to educate these mammals on their new reality. His aristocratic features appeared on every screen, broadcast, and digital display across the globe. Translators worked frantically as the alien began speaking, his dual-tone voice resonating with imperial certainty. People of Earth, your species has been selected for the honor of imperial absorption. Rejoice. The eternal Exal-Thori hegemony extends its magnificent protection to your world. Your resources now serve a greater purpose. Your children will know the privilege of serving the divine Empress Zolvarix, unifier of stars, mother of galaxies, and her son, the radiant Prince Zorthal. In the United Earth Defense Headquarters beneath Geneva, General Maya Santos watched the alien's preening speech with narrowed eyes. At 53, she'd survived 3 global conflicts and the water wars of the 2070s. She recognized the look of a conqueror who believed victory was inevitable. Record everything, she ordered the room of stunned analysts. Every frequency, every emission from that ship. I want to know their shield modulation patterns, communication protocols, and propulsion signatures. Her second-in-command, Colonel Abbasi, leaned closer. They've neutralized our nuclear capability. The Security Council is discussing surrender terms. Santos' expression hardened. Politicians will do what politicians do. We'll do what soldiers do. Prepare. While diplomatic channels opened between Earth's governing bodies and the Exal-Thori Command, Santos dispatched specialized teams with a different mission. Former hackers, communication specialists, and electromagnetic warfare experts scattered across the globe, setting up passive monitoring stations. Microscopic drones, technology still in testing phases, were released into the atmosphere surrounding the alien vessel. They believe we're primitive because we haven't mastered interstellar travel, Santos told her assembled commanders in a secure bunker. But humanity has been fighting asymmetric warfare since we picked up the first stone. Connect me with Dr. Chen at Quantum Dynamics. On screens around the world, Galvex continued his victory monologue, outlining the generous terms of Earth's surrender. He never noticed the swarm of nanobots analyzing his ship's hull composition, or the focused electromagnetic pulses mapping internal structures. The prince arrives in 3 days to accept your formal submission, Galvex concluded. Prepare appropriate ceremonial displays of fealty. The transmission ended. In Geneva, General Santos looked at the assembled data beginning to flow in from her global sensor network. 3 days, she said quietly. That should be just enough time. The Exal-Thori delegation strode into the United Council chambers with the casual arrogance of beings who had conquered 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Krelzon, resplendent in ceremonial armor that shimmered with embedded quantum crystals, didn't bother concealing his disdain as he surveyed the assembled human representatives. You will find our terms most accommodating, Krelzon announced, activating a holographic display that filled the chamber with alien script that swirled and shifted into Earth languages. The council president, Adeyemi Okafor, stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. "These resources you demand, 90% of our rare earth elements, 6 billion tons of water annually, unrestricted access to our genetic material. This seems rather extensive." "It is the standard tribute for Class C worlds," replied Krelzon dismissively. "Consider yourselves fortunate. Class D worlds surrender population for neural harvesting." The council erupted in shouted objections and panicked discussions, exactly the reaction Santos had choreographed. The Xl4 watched with barely concealed amusement as humanity appeared to fracture before them. Meanwhile, 200,000 kilometers away, Dr. Eliza Chen hunched over equipment hastily assembled in the abandoned Copernicus mining facility on the moon's dark side. "I've isolated a quantum signature from their waste processors," she informed the small team of specialists gathered around her. "Their systems use a base 16 computational architecture, but with a bizarre temporal phase shift we've never seen before." Dr. Omar Volkov, recently retired from Russia's cyber warfare division, squinted at the readings. "It's like they're computing in multiple timelines simultaneously." Chen lifted a transparent crystal salvaged from alien refuse jettisoned from the command ship. "Their network security is conceptually different from ours, but it's vulnerable. They've never needed to defend against our type of logic." Their conversation paused as a lunar rover carried another collection of scavenged alien materials into the facility. Biological waste, scraps of technology, radiation signatures. "How's our timeline?" Chen asked the rover's operator. 2 days until the prince arrives. Santos says we need something, anything, by tomorrow." Chen nodded grimly. "Tell her we'll have a backdoor into their systems by 600. Back on Earth, while the council kept the XL4 ambassadors occupied with seemingly endless procedural questions, Santos coordinated a different kind of resistance. In the Amazon basin, Tupi warriors with combat experience against eco-pirates guided special forces to establish hidden communication outposts. In Afghanistan, former insurgents who had fought 3 occupying armies shared expertise on supply line disruption. In Singapore's quantum computing labs, programmers wrote adaptive code designed to exploit the vulnerabilities Chen's team identified. Commander Galvex, oblivious to these preparations, composed his report to the prince. "The humans dissemble and delay as all inferior species do when facing inevitable absorption. Their military capabilities have been neutralized. Their governing body displays typical disorganization. They will submit when your radiance arrives. Send the final ultimatum," he ordered Ambassador Krelzon. No more discussions. The ambassador delivered the message with practiced condescension. "You have 24 hours to prepare your formal surrender ceremony. The Divine Prince does not tolerate delay." Council President Okafor bowed his head in apparent resignation. "We understand. Please, allow us this time to prepare our people." The Xl4 delegation departed, satisfied. They failed to notice the microdrones that detached from their ceremonial robes, or the quantum scanners that had mapped every component of their technology. As night fell across Geneva, Santos received Chen's message. "We're in." Her response was brief. "Execute Phase 2. The Imperial vessel carrying Prince Zorthal emerged from hyperspace in a flash of exotic particles, flanked by 17 battlecruisers arranged in the sacred formation of the Eternal Throne. Each ship bristled with weapons capable of reducing continents to ash. "Magnificent, isn't it?" the prince remarked to his military advisor, Admiral Thelfor. Standing 2 meters tall with iridescent scales and ceremonial battle scars, Zorthal had never known defeat. "My first personal conquest." "A momentous occasion, your radiance," the admiral agreed, studying tactical displays. "Though this Earth seems hardly worthy of your presence. Mother insisted I begin with something simple." The prince's inner eyelids flickered in annoyance. "As if I couldn't handle a Class A civilization." On the bridge's main screen, Earth rotated serenely, its blue-white surface deceptively peaceful. "Deploy the fleet in standard subjugation pattern," ordered the prince. "I want every human population center to see our might." Within hours, Exal-Thori warships hovered above major cities worldwide. Beijing, New York, Lagos, Sydney, their hulls reflecting sunlight and displays calculated to instill terror. "The primitives request an audience, Your Radiance," announced the communications officer. "They wish to present formal surrender aboard the flagship." The prince's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Permission granted. Let us be gracious in victory." Aboard the shuttle approaching the Imperial flagship, General Santos sat in crisp dress uniform, apparently calm despite the 4 Exal-Thori escorts towering over the human delegation. "Remember," she sub-vocalized to her team through implanted communicators, "maintain the facade of submission. Dr. Chen's team needs 30 minutes to deploy the package." Council President Okafor, seated beside her, gave an imperceptible nod. The elderly statesman had once been an actor before entering politics. Today, his greatest performance would begin. The shuttle docked, and the humans were escorted through corridors of impossible geometry to the throne room where Prince Zorthal awaited, surrounded by royal guards with ceremonial plasma halberds. "Kneel before his radiance, Prince Zorthal, heir to the eternal throne, conqueror of stars," intoned a court herald. The human delegation complied. Santos pressed a seemingly decorative pin on her uniform, activating the signal. Operation Arachnea's Go. Throughout Earth's solar system, carefully positioned assets silently activated. Commercial satellites adjusted their positions by millimeters. Mining drones on asteroid Ceres redirected their cutting lasers. Stealth probes attached to Exal-Thori hulls initiated dormant programs. The prince rose from his crystalline throne. "Your species has shown wisdom in accepting imperial dominion. Present the surrender documents." President Okafor stepped forward with a ceremonial case. "Your Radiance, we bring not only our formal capitulation, but a token of Earth's artistic achievement, digital records of our cultural heritage." Inside the case sat an ornate quantum crystal, nearly identical to Exal-Thori data storage devices, but containing Dr. Chen's virus disguised as cultural archives. "A thoughtful gesture," the prince acknowledged, motioning for an attendant to accept the gift. The crystal was inserted into the ship's cultural analysis array, exactly as Chen had predicted. Within nanoseconds, the virus infiltrated the flagship systems, replicating and distributing itself through quantum entanglement to every vessel in the fleet. 5 minutes into the prince's prepared victory speech, the lights flickered momentarily. He paused, annoyed at the interruption. Across the fleet, critical systems began behaving erratically. Environmental controls adjusted by imperceptible degrees. Targeting arrays lost calibration by microns. Communication protocols experienced millisecond delays. Admiral Thelvor frowned at his personal console, detecting anomalies too subtle for automated alarms. The prince, oblivious, continued addressing the humans. "Your species will benefit immensely from." General Santos allowed herself a small smile as her implant received confirmation. "Web complete. Imperial guidance. We shall elevate you beyond." The throne room plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting bathed the throne room in eerie crimson. The prince's guards immediately surrounded him, weapons raised toward the human delegation. "Seize them," Zorthal commanded, his voice betraying the first tremor of uncertainty. As the royal guards advanced, Santos touched her wrist communicator. "Now." The formal attaches carried by the human delegation liquefied, reforming into ceramic weapons undetectable by Exal-Thori scanners. President Okafor, moving with unexpected agility for a man his age, disabled the nearest guard with a precision strike to an anatomical weakness identified by xenobiologists. "Your Highness," Santos called out while evading plasma fire with practiced efficiency, "I suggest we renegotiate." Throughout the flagship, critical systems cascaded into controlled chaos. Artificial gravity fluctuated in security sectors. automated defense systems targeting parameters inverted, identifying Sol-4 life signs as hostile. Admiral Thelvor barked into his communicator. All ships, execute Protocol Vortex. We have a Class 1 security breach. His orders reached the fleet, but arrived subtly altered by Chen's virus, triggering emergency protocols that hadn't been called for. Outside, Earth responded. From innocuous weather satellites, orbital platforms, and ground-based facilities, thousands of modified drones launched, civilian models upgraded with military guidance systems and improvised weapons. The Sol-4 ignored these seemingly insignificant threats until they penetrated compromised shields using frequencies harvested during the diplomatic missions. In lunar orbit, Dr. Chen monitored the operation. Targeting successful. Their shield harmonics are destabilizing exactly as predicted. Her second-in-command pointed to a holographic display. Look at their formation. They're firing on each other. Across the Sol-4 fleet, targeting systems identified friendly vessels as threats. Warning shots fired. Confused communications compounded the chaos as the virus corrupted translation protocols. On Earth's surface, military commanders activated long-dormant defense systems, not the obvious installations the aliens had neutralized, but Cold War relics kept secret for centuries. Electromagnetic pulse generators, kinetic orbital platforms, and autonomous submarine drones. In New Delhi, a teenager named Priya controlled a swarm of 500 modified cleaning drones, their industrial solvent dispensers now targeting Sol-4 engine cooling vents. In Buenos Aires, retired demolition experts guided mining explosives through hull breaches. Everywhere, humans fought using technology the Sol-4 had dismissed as primitive, repurposed, improvised, and unexpectedly effective. On the flagship's bridge, a bloodied Admiral Thelvor stared in disbelief at tactical displays. Impossible. Their weapons shouldn't penetrate our defenses. A junior officer replied, "Sir, they're not using weapons we recognize as weapons." In the throne room, Santos and her team had secured a defensive position. The prince, separated from most of his guards, found himself at a tactical disadvantage for the first time in his life. "You can't possibly hope to defeat the eternal hegemony," he snarled, mandibles flaring. "Our reinforcements will reduce your world to atoms." Santos raised an eyebrow. "Probably, if they receive your distress call." She nodded toward a view screen showing the battle outside. "But right now, your fleet is a bit preoccupied." The prince watched in horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Imperial warships fired on each other, communications jammed, while swarms of tiny Earthcraft executed coordinated attack patterns. "What is happening?" he demanded. "We're happening," Santos replied simply. "Humanity has been fighting itself for millennia. We've gotten very good at it." A massive explosion rocked the flagship as the engine section breached. "Time to choose, Your Radiance," Santos said, offering a small communication device. "Unconditional surrender, or we continue this demonstration of human ingenuity." Empress Zolvarix received the fragmented distress signal in her private meditation chamber on the Sol-4 homeworld. The incomplete transmission, evidence of significant jamming technology, showed her son surrounded by primitive bipeds with improvised weapons. "Impossible," she whispered, six-fingered hands trembling with rage. She summoned her war council immediately. High Admiral Krenzathor, the Empire's most decorated warrior, bowed deeply before her crystalline throne. His carapace bore ceremonial scars from 100 conquests. "Assemble the sacred armada," the Empress commanded. "The prince requires extraction. This insignificant world will serve as an example of imperial wrath." "As you command, Divine One." The Admiral's voice betrayed no emotion, though his inner eyelids flickered with concern. Never in his 3 centuries of service had an imperial fleet been compromised by a pre-FTL civilization. Within hours, the Sacred Armada, 50 capital ships including 3 planet killers, departed for Sol, led by the dreadnought Eternal Dominion. The Empress watched from her scrying chamber, mandibles clicking impatiently. These humans will regret their defiance, she promised her ancestors' spirits. On Earth, General Santos directed operations from a mobile command center beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Holographic displays showed the prince in comfortable but secure detention. "You don't understand what you've done," Zorthal warned, his royal composure crumbling. "Mother will send the Sacred Armada. Your species will be erased from existence." Santos nodded to Dr. Chen on a separate screen. "How's our new project progressing?" "We've adapted the virus to spread through their quantum entanglement communication network," Chen replied, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "But the reinforcements will likely have countermeasures based on what happened here." "Then we'll try something they won't expect," Santos decided. She turned to an unlikely advisor, a former smuggler recruited for his expertise in avoiding detection. "Captain Rivera, is your solution ready?" The weathered man grinned. "Nothing to detect if there's nothing there. My stealth package is ready for deployment." Throughout the solar system, human assets quietly repositioned. Mining operations on Jupiter's moons suddenly went dark. Civilian traffic between Mars and Earth ceased. To incoming Xalfori sensors, the Sol system would appear nearly abandoned. Its defenders fled or in hiding. 5 days later, the Sacred Armada arrived at the system's edge. High Admiral Krenzathor scanned the readings personally. Minimal defenses detected. The Prince's fleet shows significant damage, but life signs are stable. No evidence of major human military mobilization. "Proceed with caution," ordered his second-in-command. "Remember what happened to the Prince's forces." "The Prince was careless," Krenzathor replied dismissively. "I am not." The Armada advanced in attack formation, weapons charge. As they approached Mars orbit, their sensors detected no ambush, no resistance. The Admiral permitted himself a moment of satisfaction. That satisfaction evaporated when the Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel directly into a carefully plotted minefield, not conventional explosives, but repurposed fusion reactors from Jupiter's mining platforms, rigged to detonate in precisely calculated sequences. Simultaneously, from camouflaged positions throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of ships appeared, not warships, but civilian vessels modified with experimental stealth technology and carrying single-use weapons designed specifically to target Xalfori shield frequencies. Impossible. The Admiral watched in shock as the supposedly primitive humans executed combat maneuvers that should have been beyond their capabilities. On his command view screen, a transmission forced its way through Imperial encryption. General Santos appeared, her expression calm. "Admiral Krenzathor, I presume. Your prince would like a word." The Empress paced the Imperial war chamber, her claws leaving microscopic scratches in the indestructible floor. No communication had arrived from the Sacred Armada in 3 standard cycles, an unprecedented silence. "Dispatch the Home Guard to all tributary worlds," she commanded her advisors. "I want every available warship recalled to protect the throne world." The ancient vizier, who had served 3 empresses before her, raised a trembling appendage. "Divine One, withdrawing our forces will leave the subjugated worlds vulnerable to. Do you question my judgment?" Her voice cut like a particle beam. "Execute my orders." Across the vast hegemony, Imperial battlecruisers abandoned their posts, leaving skeletal garrisons on 1,000 worlds. The Empress didn't realize she was executing exactly the strategy human tacticians had anticipated. In his private quarters aboard the captured flagship, Prince Zorthal watched recordings of Earth's history that Santos had provided. Endless cycles of warfare, rebellion, and resistance against overwhelming odds. "Your species fights itself constantly," he observed as Santos entered. "Yet you united against us immediately." "Humanity's greatest strength," she replied, setting down a tray of food adapted to his biology. "We may quarrel amongst ourselves, but we recognize a common threat." The prince's mandibles clicked in contemplation. "Our intelligence suggested your planet was divided by petty factions." "It is," Santos smiled. "But as an old Earth saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." A communication officer burst in. "General, Dr. Chen's team has successfully hijacked the Imperial broadcast network. On planets throughout the hegemony, the carefully controlled Imperial information channels suddenly displayed unprecedented images. The Prince's capture, the Sacred Armada in disarray, and the Empress recalling forces from protection duties. Most shocking to subject species was footage of humans, previously described as primitive savages, defeating the divine, invincible Imperial forces through ingenuity rather than technological superiority. On Krail Prime, a mining world stripped nearly bare by Imperial demands, workers witnessed the broadcast and laid down their tools. On Belnaran, scholars who had preserved forbidden knowledge in secret vaults for centuries began quietly distributing ancient texts on self-governance. On dozens of worlds, long-dormant resistance movements suddenly found their oppressors vulnerable. In the secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, where he'd been transferred, Prince Zorthal sensed the shifting currents of galactic politics. "My mother will destroy your planet rather than acknowledge defeat," he warned Santos. "She possesses weapons that can collapse your star." "We suspected as much," Santos replied. "That's why we're not fighting just for Earth anymore." She activated a holographic display showing simultaneous uprisings on 17 Imperial worlds. "Your empire is built on fear, Your Highness. Once that fear disappears..." The prince stared in stunned silence as his birthright began to unravel. His education had covered military strategy, economic subjugation, and the divine right of rule, but never rebellion on this scale. In her throne room, the Empress received the crushing reports. For the first time in Xal-Thori history, multiple worlds had openly defied Imperial authority. Her claws shredded the ceremonial communication scrolls. "Enough," she shrieked. "Activate the Omega Protocol." Her council gasped collectively. The Omega Protocol, a forbidden superweapon that would destroy Earth by destabilizing local spacetime, was a desperate measure. Its use would violate ancient treaties with species even the Xal-Thori feared. "Divine One," the Vizier pleaded, "the consequences. The only consequence that matters is preserving our divine authority." She transmitted the activation codes herself. Light years away, High Admiral Kren Zathor received the Omega command while negotiating with General Santos. For the first time in his centuries-long career, his hand hesitated over the authentication panel. High Admiral Kren Zathor stared at the pulsing red authentication panel, the Omega Protocol awaiting his final confirmation. 300 years of absolute loyalty to the throne warred with something unfamiliar. Doubt. "Admiral." His second-in-command watched nervously. "The Empress awaits confirmation." Kren Zathor's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. "The Omega Protocol violates the ancient compact. Even the divine throne is bound by those laws." Around him, junior officers exchanged glances. Many had accessed the uncensored human broadcasts, seeing not the savages described in Imperial propaganda, but beings who fought with honor, treated prisoners humanely, and refused to obliterate their enemies when they had the chance. "The humans have shown restraint," a young weapons officer said quietly. "They could have destroyed us when our shields failed." Silence. The second-in-command drew his ceremonial blade. "This is treason." "No," Kren Zathor countered, his decision suddenly clear. "Genocide is the treason, against everything the Empire once stood for." He turned to communications. "Connect me with General Santos." Throughout the Armada, similar conversations erupted as the Empress's extinction order spread. On 7 ships, officers barricaded themselves in control rooms rather than comply. On 12 others, outright mutinies broke out. On the Imperial throne world, the Empress sensed the wavering loyalty. She dispatched her personal assassins, the Shadow Talon, to eliminate her son. "The prince has become tainted by human corruption," she declared. "A new heir shall be grown from the royal genetic repository." The Shadow Talon infiltration craft approached Earth with stealth technology believed undetectable. They were met in high orbit by a phalanx of small Earth vessels, civilian spacecraft retrofitted with crude but effective detection systems, developed during centuries of human counterintelligence operations. How did they see us? The Talon commander hissed as evasive maneuvers failed against the swarm of interceptors. The Shadow Talon fought their way to the surface despite heavy losses, their superior combat training evident as they carved a path toward the prince's location. The kill team found their target protected not by royal guards, but by human soldiers who fought with unexpected ferocity, not out of fanatical devotion to hierarchy, but from personal commitment to their cause. Major Kamiko Tanaka, commander of the prince's security detail, had lost her family in the initial call-for demonstrations of power. Yet she stood before the alien royal, blood streaming from a shoulder wound, refusing to yield. Why? The lead assassin demanded as they clashed. He is not your kind. We protect him because we chose to, she answered, her blade finding a gap in his armor. That's what humans do. We choose. The prince, watching humans willing to die protecting an enemy who came to conquer them, experienced an emotion no Xal-Thori word could describe. In their culture, loyalty came from fear or genetic compulsion. This was something else entirely. During the battle, he accessed the communication system and made a decision that would change galactic history. He formally renounced his claim to the throne and called for his mother's abdication. Dr. Chen, monitoring Imperial communications, seized the opportunity. Her team boosted the prince's message, translating it simultaneously into the native languages of every subjected world. They added something the Xal-Thori had never considered important: context. The translations included human concepts of self-determination, consent of the governed, and liberty. Across the galaxy, billions of beings heard a member of the divine royal family reject the very foundation of imperial rule. The carefully constructed mythology of Xal-Thori's superiority, maintained through information control for millennia, shattered in an instant. On the throne world, the Empress received the news of her son's betrayal and collapsed onto her crystalline throne, mandibles slack with disbelief. The revolution was no longer merely fought with weapons, but with something more powerful: hope. 6 months after what historians would later call First Contact, a terraformed Mars hosted the inaugural gathering of the Galactic Transitional Council. The red planet's atmosphere, still in the early stages of conversion, required visitors to use supplemental breathing apparatus, creating a curious equality as representatives from 100 formerly subjugated species sat together, each adapted to their environmental needs. In the center of the circular chamber stood Prince Zorthal, his royal regalia replaced by simple diplomatic attire. The scars on his carapace, earned defending Earth against his mother's assassins, gleamed under the artificial lighting. "The Pax Xal-Thoria is ended," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Let the Pax Galactica begin." On a specially constructed observation platform, the Empress, now stripped of power and under house arrest, watched with cold fury as her son helped draft a new interstellar constitution. Her mandibles had been temporarily modified to prevent the suicide bite that had claimed 3 previous deposed rulers. General Santos and Admiral Krenzathor, once mortal enemies, jointly chaired the Security Committee. Their proposal for gradual demilitarization of former imperial forces, balanced with a mutual defense protocol against external threats, received widespread approval. "They're calling it the Santos-Zethor Doctrine," Colonel Abeji noted as he joined Santos at a viewport overlooking the Martian sunset. "Never thought I'd see humans and Xal-Thori working together." "The universe is full of surprises," Santos replied, watching terraforming drones release modified algae into the thin Martian atmosphere. "Speaking of which, how's Dr. Chen's project progressing? See for yourself." The viewport shifted to show an unprecedented scene. In a converted cargo bay, Dr. Chen demonstrated human educational technology to wide-eyed alien scientists. Her interactive holographic teaching system, originally designed for Earth's underfunded schools, was being adapted to share knowledge across species previously kept ignorant by imperial decree. Knowledge is power, Chen explained to her audience, and unlike resources, sharing it only creates more. Elsewhere on Mars, a cultural exchange summit had turned into an impromptu concert as Earth's artists performed alongside beings with sensory organs and artistic traditions entirely foreign to human experience. A four-armed Praxian drummer improvised with a human jazz quintet, creating rhythms never before heard in the galaxy. The former prince approached the center podium as the council prepared to vote on the first articles of the new charter. His once imperial posture had relaxed, almost human in its informality. The XL-4 conquered 1,000 worlds through superior technology and military might. He acknowledged, his translator conveying the nuances his species' vocal apparatus couldn't produce. But Earth conquered us with something we never understood: the power of choice. Santos turned to Chen, who had joined them for the historic moment. "Not bad for a species that still gets emotional about cat videos," she whispered. Chen grinned. "That's our superpower. We can build starships, overthrow empires, and still cry at cute animals." The XL-4 never stood a chance. As the delegates rose in thunderous approval of the first constitutional articles, Santos scanned the chamber. Representatives from worlds that had never known freedom drafted laws together. Former enemies shared meals and ideas. Species that had been deliberately kept apart by imperial policy discovered common ground. "What now?" asked Avesi. Santos watched a human child, daughter of a diplomat, teaching a young XL-4 the game of rock, paper, scissors, both laughing at the absurdity of trying to make alien hand gestures match. "Now," she said, "we do what humans have always done. We adapt. We build. We explore." She smiled. "And we remember that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or weapons. What is it? An idea whose time has come." Across the galaxy, imperial statues toppled as a new era began, with humanity not as conquerors or subjects, but as the unexpected architects of freedom.